The location could easily be defended from the Spanish. The water was deep enough for ships to dock, and there was a good supply of fresh water. Or so they thought. So the settlers, well, settled, and all seemed well. But then everything started to go wrong. Blistering heat, insects, fierce winters, Indian attacks, disease and starvation. Oh, that fresh water supply? Turns out that water was brackish, or mixed with salt, so it was undrinkable. Life was definitely not easy for the English. Behind me is the Potomac River, which forms the northern border between Maryland and Virginia. I love this river because it's so close to where I live in Northern Virginia, and so do lots of other people. In fact, the Potomac is shared by many other states, but the James is all ours here in Virginia, and that's just one of the cool things about it. It's also where it all started for the Virginia settlers. And boy, is it long, over 400 miles. You should meet Earl Swift. He's a newspaper reporter from Norfolk who was sent on assignment to explore the James. Here's what he thought.
At the headwaters of the James, where it's narrow in Highland County, and you see it trickling downhill away from you, and you think that, 430 miles downstream, it's going to be 5 miles wide, and it's going to look nothing like this. It's difficult to imagine.
We also wondered what Earl Swift thought about the early settlers who explored the James.
You can't help but be impressed, amazed really, by what folks were willing to put up with in the 17th century, in the 1600s when they showed up. Just the difficulty of the terrain is pretty remarkable, especially when you consider that they had no roads, they had no central heat. They didn't have any of the luxuries that we consider pretty indispensable today. They barely had the very basics.
Toothpaste? Nope. Dried towels? Nope. They must have wanted that gold pretty bad to make this trip. But let's get back to Earl.
I had protection from the weather, which they never had. They were wearing cotton and wool, and when it got wet, it took forever to dry out, and my stuff dried within minutes. Well, I'm sure they could have used Gore-Tex, that would have been mighty handy to them. The power bar is a great invention. The fact that I had a plastic canoe that could slam up against a rock and not shatter into a million pieces is something they didn't have, and quite a few people have died in the James in bateaux and other boats that have been hung up on the rocks and turned sideways and crushed.
How long do you think you would have lasted as a settler? Back then, there wasn't really any way to know what it was like in the New World. The Spanish had some colonies nearby, but Spain was competing with England to explore and claim the land in the New World. They were no help. So the first Englishmen in Virginia were explorers on an incredible business trip. Because, remember, the Virginia Company of London wanted to make money. They established colonies of people to find gold and other valuable resources to send back to England. The colonists were also supposed to find a faster way to sail to China than this one. Why was China such a big deal? Any guesses? Well, England was making a lot of money from the trade with China, but it could take a year to get there and back. By making a faster route, they could make more money. So when the settlers sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and up the Chesapeake Bay, they looked for a safe place to build their new homes and settle. They also set out to find a big river that would take them to China, but they didn't really have any way to know where to go. To give you an idea of just how little they knew what to expect, take a look at this map from the 1600s. Now compare it to a modern-day map. Pretty big difference, huh? Let's let Earl fill us in on more about these colonists and their supposed route to China.
The belief back then was that the east coast of the United States and of Virginia and all of the rivers branching off of it were not far at all from the west coast, and that you could travel by river from one coast to the next, and then on the other side would be China. And this was wrong, needless to say. And now we're at the falls of the James in Richmond. I traveled all of the river except for that part right there. I walked my canoe from that rock right over there to right about here.
Whoa, where did those falls come from? Check out this map. Look, it's the fall line. You know what a fall line is, right? It's a natural border where the land drops sharply, causing a waterfall. Here on the James River, the fall line is the natural border from the Piedmont to the tidewater regions of Virginia. So right here, the land drops about 10 stories. and you get these waterfalls. Earl discovered firsthand what it means when rivers flow downhill to the sea, and he learned the hard way about the fall line. Even going the other way, he didn't get all the way through the falls in a boat. The settlers had that same problem. They sailed their big ships upriver to the Powhatan Hill, where they were stopped by the falls. The English settlement here became the city of Richmond. It was so hard for them to get past these falls that it took as long to settle the state of Virginia as it did to settle all the way to the west coast. The Virginia settlers used the James to travel between Jamestown and Richmond. They also used the water at the falls as a source of power. This paddle wheel was used to transfer power from the river to industrial machines. It's a park and museum now, but in the 1700s and 1800s, there were many businesses here, including a sawmill, tannery, shoemaking, and fire brick factories. Besides travel and power, the river has been important in many other ways.
We still depend on the river for drinking water and for a place to dump our waste. It's still a giant flush toilet, really. But it's much cleaner today than it was 20 years ago. Far, far cleaner than it was 50 years ago.
In fact, the first water treatment plant in America was built on the James River at Richmond in 1832. The James River has seen a lot of firsts and played an important role in Virginia history.
Because of the James River, tobacco became a huge industry in America. Because of the James River, Hampton Roads remains the largest naval base in the world today. It's the mouth of the James that creates the greatest natural harbor in the United States.
So that's the James River, an important part of Virginia's history. Though not a lot of people rely on the James as a traveling route these days, a lot of people use it today to have some fun in the sun. Speaking of having some fun, I think I'm going to take a break from all of this history stuff and go out on the river myself. Wait a second. That's my boat.